The electrical testing world requires a broad range of equipment to ensure we can keep the lights on for the country. Much of the equipment used would require capital investments that could potentially shutter companies were they not able to rent the various equipment needed to service the highly varied needs of their clients. Joining us today is our returning guest, Adam Straub, National Sales Manager for ARENT, who ensures the power industry can meet the vast test equipment requirements that are critical to achieving the utmost in quality assurance, accuracy, and safety. Whether you're doing relay protection, high pot and cable testing, injection testing, power factor testing, or even if you need an infrared camera for thermography, ARENT has you covered. After serving in the Army, Adam, a native of New York, decided to call the Houston, Texas area home. Unlike many of the folks we have spoken with who choose the electrical testing industry post-military, he did not come from an Army prime power background, but rather stumbled into the field via his first role as a field technician with EPS. Adam then continued climbing the NETA ladder, working as a NETA 3 with Sabre Power before moving into management with Power Engineering Services, eventually becoming the Director of Field Services. Following his tenure with PES, Adam assumed the National Sales Manager role with ARENT, where he still utilizes his technical acumen to ensure his customers have the right tools and equipment for the job. Adam, you and I discussed your journey from infantryman to electrical testing in our last chat. For the audience, Adam and I talk often and have talked everything from testing to leadership philosophies in life. And I find that you have some amazing leadership insights to share. So we figured, why not share them? Adam, my friend, thanks for joining us again. Can you give our audience a quick refresher on your background?
Yeah, man, pleasure to be here, right? And like you said, we talk all the time. And our conversations, most recently, always circle around leadership and like what the ideal person is, and versus what everyone thinks it really is. And my background with the military kind of gave me a unique perspective of what a good leader is, and just like man, what a terrible leader is. It's in a leadership position just because of a title. So I think it leads to an interesting conversation today of what do people want in a leader, and what makes a good leader, and what people don't want that expected person to have. So I didn't take many notes for today, but the three things that I kind of wrote down about what a leader is, or what makes a person a good leader, is the ability to motivate their teams and inspire them to do better, right? The biggest thing you want your leaders to do is you want to strive to do what they're doing, or do your job better. The willingness to do whatever is needed, right? Does that mean that I need to go outside and shovel with the guys in the trench? Or does that mean that I need to make business decisions or lead by example, whatever it may be? And then the desire to inspire growth in others and in the organization, right? You want to balance, you want to inspire individuals, but you also want to inspire the company and lead it. So you can't just say, hey, everyone, you guys worry about being better. We also have to make this organization better as a whole. So balancing that overall overarching picture with individuals as members of the team.
Absolutely. And I think this is a pretty important part to bring up. And it's like, why is leadership important? And so one of the things I experienced in the conversations, and we're talking 100 people a week, right? Like all the time on the phone. And you often see that individuals want to leave due to some sort of ambiguity in their roles and responsibilities, right? Not having the tools that are afforded, to your point of making sure it's like, are you providing what is needed to make that individual successful within your organization? And that's it's something I hear as a common recurring theme throughout, is like, I don't like the culture here. I haven't received training. I haven't received the tools that I need and all those things. And kind of that point, what's your take on that? Like, as far as like, have you seen similar trends with that? Like folks looking to leave and do all that? I know you and I've talked about it, so definitely worth mentioning.
Yeah. I mean, you get to a certain point in your career where, some people will always chase the dollar, right? And I'm going to leave no matter what. It might be the greatest company in the world, but somebody offered me $4 an hour more, and I'm going to go. And if that's you, then you own it, right? More power to you. Go do it. But there are people, like myself and some others, that you get to a certain point in your career and you don't want to just chase a dollar, right? It's not fun. You live comfortably. So what brings you joy and excitement? And that's where companies really need to focus, in my opinion. And not saying anyone's wrong or anything, but that was what I focused on at PES, and what I try and bring to ARENT, which does a great job at it. But like, what motivates each person? one person might be motivated by the dollar, the other person might be motivated by a title, somebody might be motivated by the opportunity to get training. But recognizing what each individual need is, to me, is just probably one of the most important things. That way you can retain your talent.
Well, and to that point, man, I think a lot of leaders get caught up in the day to day and the visionary aspects of it. And I mean, we're limited to 24 hours a day. You and I, we talk at 9, 10 o'clock at night sometime, right? We're kind of wired the same way in that aspect. But there's a different level of skill required to go out there and have a true understanding of your workforce and what their needs and desires are and where they want to go. And you can't just run that without having that human interaction and really, getting involved. And I've seen it in the past where individuals, they kind of get in that glass tower effect where they just kind of hang out up there. And I mean, different strokes, different folks. You can do that. You have to have a visionary, right? There's tons of learning, books and things out there that kind of talk about the visionary via the EOS system or something like that, right? Like the visionary and the the visionary and why can I not? The operator, basically, right? The guy that's kind of over it. I'm slipping this morning here, but in Gino Wickman's kind of construct, right? And so there's the visionary and the guy that goes out and does the operations day to day. But what if you could kind of expand upon that and have that individual who really understands their workforce and kind of do it and really dives down deep and understands it? And I think it becomes less tenable as your organization grows, right? And kind of getting to those direct reports and then having those relationships. And so you're inevitably going to have some of those barriers built in. But from that aspect of it, what do you think are some things a leader could do to kind of overcome those situations?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to leading by example, right? And doing whatever is needed. So in your organization, especially if you're able to start it small and build it to something big, is you set the expectations and the culture, and you show that, hey, this matters to me, right? You matter to me. Your team matters to me, what you guys are doing. And then eventually you are going to get to a point, if you have 150, 200 employees, that you can't just go out and grab everybody every single day and say, hey, talk to me, let me know what's going on. But if you've led by example and you set the foundations the right way, your team members that you have put in place to lead those people, they do that because you did that for them. So they do that for their people. And then as the company grows and everyone moves up and advances together, they know, hey, the thing that I valued the most was that my boss sat down and talked to me, not just hey, here's an official review form. Let's do a counseling like you do in the military and say, hey, I've got to do this because someone else said I have to. It's like, no, I want to know what you're doing, Mike. You're like, what's going on? How are your kids?
Exactly.
It's not just about work. And then those conversations make the conversations about work easier. So that way, if it is a difficult conversation to have, you know that, all right, my boss isn't just here to yell at me because I screwed something up. Like, they know that I'm a human and I'm dealing with something. So like, hey, I know you got something going on at home. How can we mitigate that at work? And how can we help outside of work if needed, right? If you need support somewhere. But that way you kind of have the whole picture.
Now, with regards to that, so it's very interesting because the military, obviously, we've been doing this for a couple hundred years, right? And everything's kind of solidified and it's very much top down, leadership, and everything is codified in writing by a process, procedure, a chit, whatever it may be. So obviously we don't have all those tools that we had in the military in our tool belt, right? And then you're dealing with a different dynamic because a lot of us are obligated by a 4YO, 6YO, whatever it may be to your next mark, right? So a little bit different. It's a little bit more challenging, but I think we can translate a lot of that over. What are some of those things that you're doing within ARENT even to show those your fresh onboards and those new folks, right? Because you're holding a very senior title as National Sales Manager. What are you doing on a day-to-day to show your individuals that you align it and, showing your buy-in to their progress?
Yeah, man, I go out of my way, and it's not just salespeople, right, as we're expanding that, but anybody in the team, to let them know that, hey, I might not be your direct report. You might not come to me for your challenges. You might have the boss, but I am here, and I have been around, and I am part of the company, and I want to see you be successful. And because your success equals my success, right? As a sales guy, nobody needs me, right? Like, customers can come to ARENT and our team is phenomenal, and they'll get a quote out and they'll get the equipment out and they will test it and make sure it's all good. They can all do their job without me. I am useless without those guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
and that's a good place to be because you understand that it's like a pilot and his plane captain, right? Same stuff. There's a very, very important bond there.
Absolutely. So letting them know, like, hey, yeah, I get it. I am the national sales manager. I am on this path, and you guys aren't in this, exact same criteria. But we need each other, right? I really need your support, and I'm here to help you do that. So, like when I go to the office and the calibration techs have a question because I've got 10 years in the field experience, or operations is going through something, or they're just there and they just want someone to BS with sometimes. Like I can be that person, right?
Right.
And not have that wall of like, oh well, no, he's the national sales manager. I don't want to talk to him about this Fluke 1777 order that's going out, right?
Right.
Because it's beneath them, which is not the case, right? There's nothing beneath anyone in a company.
No, agree. And I agree with that. And then, so some of the other things that kind of align, and I know a lot of this is talking military to civilian translation. One of the things, if you're going through like leadership COXO pipeline, you have to kind of write down your core values and mission statements and all that other good stuff. And it's great whenever you see it, right? And then it's oftentimes it's a thought exercise, or tends to be, right? And it may be written down and it's kind of semi-codified. And of course, in the military and the Navy, honor, courage, and commitment. Those are our core values writ large, right? For the macro. And then your skippers will basically have their own kind of flows and fundamentals. But then you'll see some that kind of really push that message out. And hey, this is what we believe in for my ethos and what we're going to do over the tenure of my command, and do those things, and then really push down and double down, and then support folks as they're going through that, right? But then you'll see some, because again, the military is filled with great leaders and not so great leaders as well, right? So then you'll see some, and it's more toxic, get the mission done, beat them over the head with the club and all that, instead of trying to get that buy-in. And I even see it internally to a ship, right? And I'm sure you did from platoon levels and things like that. Certain companies or other individuals within there, they were very streamlined, efficient, and running and doing, right? And you could even use Navy SEAL boat crews when they're going through BUDS, right? Like some teams just naturally excel and do better. And then they'll even swap like the leadership from one team over to another boat and see if, trying to really gauge and assess the leadership aspects of it. How applicable is that to the civilian side? Are you guys really pushing your mission statements, your core values, and are you reinforcing those type of things? And do you find value if that's the case? Because it's just from my lens that I'm kind of seeing it.
I do. I mean, it's not as simple in the civilian world to take one leader from one department and shift them to another one, like it might be in a platoon, and say, "Hey, platoon sergeants, you guys are swapping," right? Because there are some unique things that every department is doing. But as a whole, from the top down, you want to lay out, "Hey, these are the standards. This is what's important to us." If you come to ARENT, you'll look. There are signs all over the place talking about our standards and what our core values are, and we do our best to live them, right? And it's not always a checkbox say, "Hey, did you live the core value of ARENT today?"
Right.
But when you leave work, did you do the things that are important to us as an organization at ARENT, at Southern Staffing, like wherever it will be? No, I don't. I'm not going to go through and make sure I checked off every single one of the 4 or 5 core values, but like, do I know that I stayed true to what my company and what my leadership wanted me to do? And that is a reflection of making sure that your leadership knows what is expected, not just of your task, but the way you do them.
Absolutely. And I'm going to kind of opine on this for a second, because I think these things are very, very important. I think it translates over well. So when I was founding Southern Staffing Group and kind of trying to figure out, just as a sole proprietor, figuring out just the landscape of things, right? A couple of those things that were just ingrained in me is, okay, what mission are we trying to accomplish, and what core values, right? And I've got a list of, I believe, 8 of them. It varies sometimes, but we have 8 that we live by. And it's little stuff like doing the right things even when no one's looking, right? Make sure that you're treating the space with respect. If you're a guy and you're using the restroom, put the damn seat down, right? Clean up after yourself, empty the trash, like do those little right things when everybody's looking as a sole proprietor, because that's like me trying to establish what leadership and right looks like, right? So that was from the initial onset for us. And I think a lot of that is just due to having been a military officer and gone through all the training curriculum and kind of being exposed to it. Was that already in place when you had already when you came over to AREN, or were you involved in the core of the mission statement, core value side of? And if so, what did that look like?
Yeah, so there was already their core values, right? They did exist, but they hadn't been pen to paper, and the graphics and all of that hadn't been out. We hadn't held large company meetings because it was a smaller company, right? Where
Right.
Paul, to his credit, and he still does today, right? We're not so big where he can't, but there was a lot more time where he could go and just have those conversations with everybody one-on-one. We used to do a meeting every single day, whole company wide, and we would cycle people in so that way we still answer the phones and get orders out, but somebody would touch the meeting from every department every day, and it would move. And that was kind of where we went over things and were able to lay out like, hey, this didn't meet the standard. why didn't it? How can we fix it and get better? And we've done better. And the good thing is we're gotten busier, so we can't squeeze an hour meeting into every single day
Right.
for leaders of every single department. But when we do them, it is known like, hey, these are the things still that matter. We still go over the same stuff. Now take it to your teams and communicate that to them.
I like that. And like I think you bring up a great point in scalability, right? So it's very, very easy as we're kind of a smaller dynamic organization to pick up the phone and call and everything. And I'm getting to a point now to where the calendar pretty much fills up itself, right? And I'm still making myself available to my team, but it's become much more difficult to kind of reinforce a lot of those core values and missions because you get caught up in the day-to-day grind. Are there any mechanisms in place that you've seen that work well for trying to reinforce those? Do you guys do quarterly feedback, semi-annual, annual performance reviews? What are you guys doing? And do you think it could be improved to hit those touch points to make sure that they're being brought in and understand the flow of the company?
Yeah. So one of the things I did at PES that I found super successful, and I haven't seen it anywhere else, is I did quarterly performance reviews, and then I did a yearly professional review. So they sound similar, but they were a little bit different, right?
Yep.
Yearly, people want to raise every single year, right? But you build that evidence and that conversation on your quarterly review, so that way when it comes time for that annual review to say, hey, we went over these every single quarter. These were the reoccurring issues. These were the things that were fixed. These were the things where you improved, or the things where you didn't improve, and that kind of justifies the financial aspect of it. But it also gives you evidence from quarter to quarter to say, hey, right, we talked about you haven't really, I haven't seen anything from you that you're trying to get better. But it also opens up your employee to say, you haven't helped me, right? We talked
Yep.
about this. You said, hey, you need to improve. And then the last time we've talked about it was 4 months ago or 3 months ago in our other quarterly meeting. Where are
Right.
you as a leader to help me get better at it too? So it opens up that avenue both ways. And one of the things I did, I built, I hate to just use Excel for things, but I built kind of like a tracker and said, hey, this is how I judge you. I want you to rate yourself. And that way, if there was a numerical difference between you think you're a 5 and I think you're a 2, why are we off, right? What am I not
Right.
seeing that you're doing? Or what am I seeing that you don't have the self-awareness to figure out, which makes it easy instead of just saying, I'm the boss, I'm right. Because a lot of times you need that input. You need that two-way
Absolutely.
street.
Well, and everybody's wired differently, right? So you're going to have some people that are more introverted. They're not necessarily going to be like as vocal as we are, be like, hey, Jack Wagon, give me some support here, right? And so they may very well just be hanging out doing what they think is right. And so as a leader, I think that's very important to be aware of your surroundings, right? And I mean, we're taught that from day one. Always be aware, and head on a swivel and all that other good stuff. But I think it applies to your personnel management as well. Look for those key indicators. You're around these people for a large majority of your life, probably more so even that you spend at home. You're going to see changes and stuff like that. And you just kind of have to be aware and then have that rapport built where you can approach each other and really talk through and work through that. But you also, as a leader, right seat, right bus, different personalities, all that other good stuff. You have to have that awareness or a leader, or at least that's my humble opinion, to know what that looks like and see when something's off. And so I think that's one of those things you're seeing this shift in the market. I mean, there's a lot of empathy surrounding job searching right now, and it seems like it's more so and all those other things. But there's some validity to that, right? A lot of people just don't feel like they're being heard in the space, and I think that's where we're seeing a shortfall in leadership, to where you're just being treated as a billable entity and you're not getting supported, right? It may be a logistics dispatch, like, hey, go service this job, sell the stuff, and then go, but you're not giving them those growth opportunities. And I've seen some companies that do it good and some that don't, and so we try to align ourselves with those companies that are very focused on those things and think we've done so, because I saw it work time and time again in the military, right? And getting that constant feedback cycle and making it work. So I think it's so important.
You made a good point. A couple of them, having the rapport is huge, and that's where, massive. As a leader, it's massive to say, hey, I'm going to talk to you outside of scheduled meetings, right? Because a scheduled meeting, everyone goes into it, they're tense, right? You as a leader are tense. The person in the meeting is like, well, what are we talking about, right? Is it good? Is it bad? So just having that conversation and that free flowing, and instead of saying, hey, I've got an open door policy, prove it, right?
Yeah.
Get your ass up and get out of your office, and you leave the door and go to their office. Go talk to them, so that way they're comfortable with it. And then you also mentioned the empathy in the job search. I wrote down, and I went to a presentation at a NETA conference last year about workforce development and the generational differences between the workforce.
Huge, man. It's
Right?
so wild right now.
To me, I love it. Like I love that
I do
psychology
too.
of what drives the different genres or the different age groups. Whatever the hell, I forget what they're called, but from millennials to Gen X
Yeah.
to boom
Generations.
generations. Thank you. And the biggest thing to me is the the overwhelming theme right now is it's not just about chasing money. It's about that work life balance and being able to say, hey, I want to feel heard at my company. I don't have to be involved in every single decision, but I want to feel like I understand why we're doing things. So that transparency of the leadership is huge to say, hey, Micah, no, it's not your company. This is why we're going this direction and why we do these things and why they're so important to us because as the leaders of the company, this is where we think it's going to help us go to that next step. And then wait, you're bought in and say, hey, I can help get us there, right? Because this is what's important. And that's overwhelmingly one of the themes of younger employees right now.
Well, and I think we highlight this in extreme battle situations. What's the number one killer of any mission is comms, right? Like if you don't
Yeah.
have good comms, that's going to be that's going to kill it and ultimately end up in. And I know that's an extreme example of military type,
Yeah.
doing operations. But communications is the barrier to success, in my humble opinion. And the more frequently you communicate, messaging is very important. But just letting them know that you have that rapport, you're willing to support and do all those other things, I think is massive. And you're going to miss out on a lot of that Gen A millennial talent if you're not willing to do that, because that's the lens with which they see the world, and you're not going to change their purview on that. So the only option we have is to try to make those two mesh and come up with a solution that works for everybody.
Yeah, and it should be fun, right? I mean, I love talking. Maybe I'm a dork, but I love talking about the industry, right? I want to have those conversations. Like, hey, let's talk about it. It's fun, right? You're looking at a spreadsheet and thinking about pricing and adding equipment. Like, it's fun for 20 minutes, and then your eyes cross, and one cell turns into another. Like, no, let's have a conversation about like why are we doing great? Why is A-Rent taking traction? Why did PES have traction? Why are people talking about us in the industry? Because hey, these guys are doing something different, and like it's not going to be a blip on the radar, right? They're gaining traction because they're doing it the right way, and now all of a sudden people want to go work there, and customers want to interact with them, and that's fun, right? To say
Absolutely,
we have this idea, and we can see it translate into reality.
No, and to that point, and like I said, definitely one of the key takeaways, if anybody takes anything away from this, I think it's definitely that communications and really conveying the message on a constant basis. Because if not, right, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. If you think about it, that's why that age-old adage exists, right? So if we're constantly reinforcing this, and I think that's when you definitely see the standards fall off, and that's why we had Chiefs, even though now we can put hands in pockets and stuff, or you couldn't walk across the grass. It's a constant reinforcement, even though it may seem so asinine, right? But it's just a reinforcement of standards so you don't let them slip. And I also think there's some value to be had from that direction of things and that reinforcement mechanism.
Yeah, and that communication is key. It's not always positive.
Nope.
But you have to have that communication be open so that way, hey, those standards that we talk about, right, and the roadmap that we discuss and we have fun and we daydream about taking over the world one day, like you and I talk about. Well, we're not meeting those expectations.
Yep.
And we have to have that uncomfortable conversation, but we do communicate all the time. So it's okay that we're having an uncomfortable conversation. It's not the end of the world. And it's an opportunity to grow from, hey, we talk about these things, but you're not actually executing them. So how can we get you to execute? So that way, in a week from now, we take over the world, right? Or whatever the goal may be, that team member understands, all right, hey, it's not just always fun and games and joking and laughing. They do want to see me actually execute my job. And we can have that conversation and not just be oh my God, I'm in trouble and, I'm going to go home and hide. It's like, oh, I got to get better.
Well, and I think that can also be addressed in the construct of things, right? So one of the things that we did, if we're in CIC and going through training cycles, right, and they're putting everything the Russian arsenal can, and you go Winchester on your missiles and all that other good stuff, and so you're in these very complex, dynamic situations with multiple aspects, and you're engaging and shooting things down and all that, and you run that scenario for about 3 hours, right? And one of the what we do every time, this is with assessors on board or our own internal training teams and all that. But part of it is this isn't an ass chewing session. This is root cause analysis, basically, right? Reverse engineer the good, bad, or indifferent. and make those constructive points part of your daily workflow so people don't got it, you're going to get your feelings hurt a little bit right now, but if you understand why we're doing it, we're reverse engineering it, we're figuring out what the root causes of where we broke down, right? Or in the military they call it the error chain. And one of those I just bumped my mic, but what's the error chain? Where if you have a collision at sea, there's a chain of events that led that to happen, and you obviously the secondary and tertiary preventative measures failed in that particular instance. We need to do a deep dive and figure that out. And it's not for the sake of punishing X, Y, and Z individual. It's to learn, take those lessons learned, implement them, and go from there. Now, are there egregious and malice reasons? Yep, we see it, right? Gun decking maintenance. You were supposed to go do this and you just blatantly didn't do it and you document it as being done. That's a character issue, and we need to address that with that individual. But it's not that everything is always malicious. Something, we're all human. Things break, right? And so if you have that as your operating paradigm and it's just to get better, now I think you break down some of those barriers.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, man. If you talk to anyone that's ever worked directly for me or close with me, I want people to stub their toe, right, for lack of a better term, because if you make a mistake, you learn from it. If you don't learn from it, you waste the opportunity. It's completely wasted and only negative. But if you make a mistake, there's plenty of positives that can come out of it, and find that silver lining and say, hey, why did X, Y, and Z happen? And how can we not do it next time? And then it's rewarding to see that it didn't happen again. And I used to tell all the guys that worked for me, it's okay if you make a mistake. I'm not going to chew your ass out if you make a mistake. I'm going to ask you why you made that decision. And if you can rationally justify why you thought it was a good idea, we can learn from that. That's plenty of work.
Absolutely.
If you are malicious about it, you're absolutely right. We've got a whole different problem. It means you went out of your way to do something negative and malicious to the company, to the customer, to your colleagues, whatever it may be. And then, you probably just got to go pack your bags because you're a bad character. But if you make a mistake and you can justify why you thought it was, we can work with it. And you know what? Maybe I learned something in the end too, because I thought about it in a completely different light.
And that's, I think, is a very, very valid point with leadership, right? Is being willing to admit wrong and being open, right? And a lot of people get set in their freaking ways, and I've dealt with it with prior leaders and all that other good stuff down that path. Like, you have to be flexible and be willing to entertain feedback and things like that, because if you use that as a cycle and that root cause analysis, and then you're just turning it into this is the only way it should be done. Now you're not really working collectively as a team. You know what I'm saying? So
and it's give and take too, right? Like, hey, I want to do it this way. My boss wants to do it this way. Let's try and meet in the middle. I got to give some. Hopefully, they'll give some to say, hey, you hired me to do something. Let me try and do it my way and stay within those guide rails that you gave me. But that way, you kind of work together as a team. I've been fortunate enough in my last 2 companies, actually 3, where people have said, hey, this is the end goal. We want to stay in these rails, but if you need to zig and you need to zag, then go for it. As long as we kind of get there, it's not going to be so much you do it this way or get out.
Well, and I think you bring up another point of leadership, which I found to be very, very important, which is empowering your individuals to have some autonomy and make decisions, right? We're all in our, you enter the workforce 18, 19, 20, some at 16, right? You've got all this experience. We're not here like got it. I'm going to establish, like you said, framework, guidelines, whatever it may be, but I want to empower those individuals to make some decisions and not just use them as a tool. And I think that's one of those things of empowerment that's very, very big where you can, right? Like, it's not always going to be feasible, but if you can, always try to empower. What's your take on that?
Yeah. And that goes back to my point of earlier of inspiring growth, right? Give them opportunities. Even if as a leader, like, hey, it's not what the decision I'm asking them to make is not an important one. We're going to be good no matter what. Let somebody else make the decision. Let them feel empowered that, hey, I got this task. I've never had it before, and I'm going to figure out how to do this, because they want to, right? They want to feel rewarded and know that they were important to the overall outcome. As a boss and a leader, you want to try and put them in the safest positions to make those choices. That way, I'm not going to tell a junior tech to go run a 3-week turnaround. Like, that's not safe. Something bad's going to happen. But if I give them a small
skills matching,
exactly. If I give them a small crew and say, all right, here's this task that, in all intents and purposes, you can't screw up. You guys just do it. I'm not telling you how to do it, where to do it, when to do it. It's just got to get done, right? And then you empower them. They get confidence, and then they start being ready to make more intelligent and important decisions where maybe you don't know if it's going to be okay as a boss, but they've proved themselves so many times that you trust that they're going to go about it the right way.
And again, that goes back to knowing your people as well, right? And being involved. And to your point about getting out of the office and walking around, we call that leadership by walking around. Literally, that's what it was. And you get out and you walk around and you go say hi and you swing by the mess decks, you shake hands and do all that other fun stuff just to show that presence, right? You want to be out and you want to make your presence known. And down to the dumb crap that we did in the military, which, we would consider it to be some, like, we have sweepers 3 times a day, right? Where the entire ship gets out and sweeps the whole thing. But it was an awesome opportunity. And we'd have, it's not just like we're not grinding and everybody's slaving away cleaning. You'll have speakers set up. And that was an opportunity for the khakis to be out and about and walking around and to engage and interact and point out things, right? So it was almost a built-in thing. And I didn't really consider it to be like that. And I don't know if that's what the reasoning was. Obviously, you want to be a good purveyor of taxpayer money, obviously, right? And that's why we do all the press and everything that we do. But sweepers seems a little excessive at 3 times a day. You know what I mean? Where you're literally out and about and cleaning every inch of that. But if you think about it, that is a perfect opportunity for all your leadership to get out and mingle with everyone else. Of course, you're going to have your people that are, leading the charge in the various watch stations that are, driving the ship. But everybody else that's not on rotation, that's when you get out. And man, those are some of the best times I have memories of, is just getting out. And you'd walk down a P-way, somebody's rocking out with death metal over here, and then we're rapping and we're all, shooting the shit and just enjoying each other. And I think that's an important aspect of it, of building that bond and rapport,
Yeah, those informal interactions are what
Huge,
build the foundation. Man. So that way those formal interactions are less uncomfortable and they're more productive because of form. Beat that horse to death, but a formal interaction is just, it's awkward, man. Like, hey, come sit in my office across from my desk because I'm your superior and I need to talk down to you. Is what the hell?
It's very military.
Yeah. What good comes from that, right?
Yeah.
Nothing other than making someone feel like crap, right? Like, hey, at the end of the day, you could be the CEO of Joe Schmo's paint company and you could be Jeff Bezos. Guess what? They're still people. He's just a human being. So putting yourself on that level, right? In the Navy, right? As people are sweeping and we're walking around and talking, and I'll pick up a broom like, hey, I'm the same human being as you are. Yeah, I have a different responsibility than you do. Maybe I get paid more than you do at the moment, but I'm still a person, right? At the end of the day, I have the same struggles. If I get a cold, my body doesn't fight it off any differently than yours does.
Absolutely. And to that point, it's just lived experiences that make the difference. Lived experience, opportunities, right? And those things, to your point. Now, is there a place for those ask-you-in conversations? I think there
100%.
absolutely is. You know what I mean?
100%.
So they happen, but to that point, I'm going to do it privately with that individual and not publicly, right? I don't want to humiliate anybody. I'm ultimately chewing ass because we had an egregious violation at some point. And it was even more so as a junior, right? So when I was a lieutenant junior grade that came from that E6 background, so I had the tech stuff. I already thought I was hot shit. And I would dress people down, and that wasn't the way, right? And shame on me, I recognize that in hindsight, right? Like, your goal should not be to make a junior cry, right? And sometimes it was. And so I've lived and learned, again, to that point of being flexible and learning from your mistakes, right? And it's changed the dichotomy with which I view leadership, really. And again, it's lived experiences, and I think that's important to point out, is even though you've been assigned that task or that, that title as a leader of some sort, that individual may not have had the requisite experience. And to that point of Jim Collins' right seat, right bus, right? Or right seat on the bus, like, a lot of people are inevitably, and it happens in the military, you may test well, right? You're an E6. But you were working as a technician because you were very, very good and you didn't really show the need to go leadership. Now you're thrust into this position, right? So they don't have necessarily the training. And I think the military is good. You get your, E4, 5, 6 training or leadership training, which helps. But again, it's a week-long course at best. And so there's going to be some of that, disconnect there with your leadership, simply because, in my particular instance, we're learning this crap too, right? And so that's, I think, which is a very, very valid reason for putting out content like this. Is like, nobody's perfect. We're all still in a learning process. And so hopefully some of the stuff that we're giving will help somebody.
Yeah, I had the benefit of, I graduated undergrad first and then I joined the military. So I was 22 when I enlisted, which helped because that 4 years, you don't think it, but you grow up quite a bit from 18 to 22. And I was still an idiot kid at 22. But I was self-aware enough to realize, hey, I don't like the way that this E5 or E6 or E7 is talking to me when they need something done. I'll be damned if I'm going to do that to my juniors when I'm an NCO. So when I took over my section, my squad, my section, my platoon, when I took over as a project manager or a job lead or as the director, I'm not talking to people. I'm not talking down to people. There are ways to get your points across without insulting, raising your voice, and just overall being an asshole. It's just
Yeah.
unnecessary. No one responds to it.
Hey, folks, many thanks for tuning in to the interview with Adam and I, where we discuss leadership in depth. Unfortunately, due to technical difficulties, the last 20 minutes of the video did not come through. So, apologies for that. If you have any questions for Adam and I, of course, feel free to reach out. And again, apologies for not giving you the entire interview. It truly was fantastic. Unfortunately, the media is non recoverable now. So I still wanted to let you see and gain some insights from what we did, hence releasing the short section that we did. But I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks again for tuning in, and apologies for a lack of quality assurance on my end. And again, thanks for everything. If you like what we're doing, please like and subscribe. Mike out.